And I think we're live. Are we live? Hey, guys. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for joining me on this lovely Saturday night. Anybody there? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Please tell me you can hear me. It says I'm live, but it also says no one's watching. And yet I see people in the chat. There we go. Now it says people. Okay. Hello, hello. All right. First of all, thank you. First of all, thank you for coming. And thank you to any of you who are in the chat right now who sat with us for any portion past like 5 minutes yesterday on that 3-hour epic live stream with Karl and Borsenko. That was, honestly, guys, that was like therapy for me. I have to thank you because I didn't sleep the night before after watching that poor Will get abused, literally verbally abused by those people. And going through it again with someone else and with all of you, it just really helped me get that all out. You know, when you're like screaming to the ceiling and nobody's listening, but then when there are people there saying, no, Deb, you're not crazy. You're not insane. Like we see it too. It was really helpful. So plus I just wanted people to see and hear what ought to have been the counter arguments, what people ought to have been saying to those people, and that Will wasn't able to do. And that's not Will's fault. Please do not hold it against Will. I kind of understand. Remember, he's a teacher. He's got to keep his job. And I think he really was doing us a service by sort of wading through water neck deep, like as he described it, somebody. He let us see full length. He let us see what that's like, what that feels like. And we could put ourselves in his shoes much better than if he had opted out. Wheezy is my new favorite. If he had opted out when most of us would like to have, which was at the redefinition of racism part of it, then we wouldn't have had all the other stuff. We might have had enough, though. I mean, I guess if somebody's going to insist that you agree with them and insist that you agree in the redefinitions, you know. But anyway, what motivated me to come here tonight, I was thinking about making a standalone video, but then I think better, honestly, on my feet. So what motivated me was watching him. I realized any of us, literally any of us, as smart as we think we are, as on top of it as we think we are, any of us is susceptible to the tactics, the verbal abuse tactics they used yesterday. It could happen to any of us. It could catch us by surprise because sometimes people start off seeming really reasonable. You can get into a conversation and then bam, they'll hit you with something. And what I think we fail to realize in our culture is how unwilling we are to be rude. And I don't mean that we would be rude to disagree or to argue, but that we've been almost acculturated to believe that being very direct in disagreement is a form of rudeness, is a form of aggression. And then when you have people who then turn to you and tell you, as they did yesterday to him, that he was aggressing against them with just his like very meek disagreement, it sort of pushes buttons in us that we don't want to have pushed because we want to see ourselves as good people. So I decided I'm going to go live and I'm going to talk about the 4 things I think they use the most, not just people in person, but the news media and those who are defending critical race theory, and all of its offshoots. I have to say now, and all of its offshoots. By any other name, this dead poisonous flower would smell just as noxious. Okay, so it doesn't matter what it's called. If somebody tries to tell you that America is a white supremacist nation, that deeply embedded in all of our institutions is white supremacy, and the kind of embedded that like you can't get it out, it's not a tumor, it's you know, it's just this, you got to just kill the host, it's like a parasite, right? If you right, I don't have to be here today. I have other things I could have been doing. Yes, exactly. But you're being so uncivil and arguing. Exactly. We're going to talk about that. So, if they tell you that we're white supremacists, they tell you that our founding documents were grounded in white supremacy or rooted, they use the word root because the concept of rooting out is one that is deeply embedded in critical race theory and all of its offshoots. We have to root out the racism, as if racism is a, like I said, it's a kind of poison. It's a kind of parasite or weed that just keeps growing and growing and growing. And if you hear those kinds of phrases, and if people tell you there's no other way to get rid of racism but critical race theory because it's the thing, it's the only thing that critically examines these institutions, if they tell you it's not a matter of whether racism happened or whether there was racism in play, when you're looking at numbers that show a disparity between white people and anyone else, except Asians, of course, then you're hearing critical race theory. And they can tell you all day long that's not it, but that's what you're hearing. Interesting. Root. This is interesting. Root equals radix in Latin. I'm not saying radix right, I'm sure, but origin of radical. Very interesting. Thank you for that tidbit. Interesting. Okay. So what I noticed they use is gaslighting. They use it a lot. And gaslighting is from a movie that was about a man trying to get his wife, I believe, wealthy wife, committed rather than just murder her or divorce her or whatever, because he wanted her money. So he keeps turning the gas lights in their home like off and on, like from a distance. And she keeps seeing it. And he keeps insisting, he'd come there off, like, I don't know what you're talking about. You're insane. You're seeing things, to the point where she almost believes that she is seeing things, that maybe it's her. She begins to question her reality. So the term gaslighting has come to mean when people try to, it's a form of psychological manipulation in which a person sort of covertly sows seeds of doubt in you. And sometimes it's not so covert, but it can be covert. It can be right in your face. They're getting very bold about it. You could be looking at an assignment from a class that has all this, the critical race theory stuff, and you're like, white people are all racist. Whatever. You could be looking right at it, and you could be showing it to somebody on social media, and they can say that's not what that says. That's you're taking it out of context. That's not what that means. Or you've just seen it, or you've just shown it to people, and you'll see them maybe the next day or somewhere else saying, this never happens. No, those people who tell you that they're seeing it, they're crazy. That's not true. That's not true at all. That's no. They tried to do it to do the Thin Man. I love the Thin Man movies. I love them. Myrna Loy is like one of my the combination of those two is just fantastic. Anyway, so they try to get you to believe that what you see right in front of your face is not real or is not what you think you see. So they did this to Will yesterday. They told him that the things he's seeing in his school, that he's hearing in his school, that he's seeing other teachers doing, that he's seen parents reporting, whatever, that you're cherry picking, that doesn't really happen, you're making it up, that kind of stuff is designed to make you question your own mind. I'm not sure if you're saying that I'm crazy. Maybe I am crazy. But anyway, that's one of the things they do all the time. They tell you you're not seeing it. What we're seeing now is, thank you, hi. We are seeing the news media jump on board. We are seeing major news media begin to do opinion pieces. Some of them are calling them opinion pieces, some of them are not. But they will have supposed experts in critical race theory come to tell you what critical race theory really is. And what's interesting is if you look at just the headline is the headline has people are seeing the wrong thing in critical race theory. What's all the fear about? They're crazy, whatever. There'll be headlines about that. And I wonder if they hope you don't read the article, because then you go and open up the article and you read what they're telling you. And maybe the first paragraph talks in very high-minded academic terms about it's an academic theory or study or process of examining blah, 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 blah. Well, if you get to the next paragraph down, I saw one on Forbes today, and it says, what it really is. Then it starts talking about deeply rooted in all of our institutions as racism, whatever. And so if you just go by the headline, you'll think, well, maybe it isn't what I think it is. Maybe I'm wrong. And if you read the first paragraph because you're busy or whatever, you go, oh, Okay, well, if that's all it is, and you might stop reading. And this is like it's like a graduated kind of thing. Like, well, if you get down to it, if you keep reading, there it really is. But by now you have doubt. So you have the doubt and you get to the lower part of the article, and maybe you and I are saying, well, maybe I'm not seeing this right. Maybe they're right. And here's the problem, guys. They're not so completely wrong that you can't get sucked in. What do I mean by that? Well, we could look at disparities between racial groups, and we could examine things like school, just school performance outcomes in school, literacy rates, for example, test scores, whatever. And you do see a disparity. That is real. Like, we would all probably agree that numerically we're looking and there is this disparity. But we never step back and question, why are we looking at people this way in the first place? Is there value to looking at groups of people by race and then saying, how are they doing academically as a group? There's probably some value, but I wonder if we sort of overweight it. But we never get past that. We never get to that question. It's assumed to have, it's a net good 100%. And then now that means we must do something across the group, as opposed to say, do we need to dig a little deeper? Do we need to look a little deeper? So because that is true, it's easier for arguments like, the gaslighting thing to take hold, because they'll start with well, don't you agree that there's a disparity in outcome? And then you say, well, yes, I do. Well, so don't you see that that's racism? And then you might say, well, no, I don't. And then they'll come to one of the other arguments. But the gaslighting is trying to make you feel like what you're looking at as their solution isn't really what you think it is. It's something more benign. And they're going to do it again and again and again. Okay. So I don't know if I have great advice for you. I just want you to be on the lookout for the gaslight, that you'll say something and they'll say, no, come on. Even in the middle of that conversation yesterday, we're being literally verbally abusive to him. They were gaslighting. He said, well, what if I feel shamed here? And they attacked him. It was like, and they went after him. And then he was told that he had attacked them by expressing his feelings. And they made up this whole thing. And it was like, he says, no, but what are you talking about? That didn't happen. That's a form of gaslighting. So there's not much more to say about that. I think you guys know what it is. It happens all the time. Thank you. I'm not really sure. I'm not going to put that up there. I appreciate the money, but I'm not going to say human females. I'm not going to say that. Y'all can read that. So that's gaslighting. The next one I would say is the next one they go to. So in other words, if you're in a conversation or you're engaging with people about this topic and the gaslighting doesn't really work, you're like, I'm pretty sure it is what it is. Or maybe you have the wherewithal to say, let's say you're right, and it's not critical race theory specifically. I still oppose it. Like, I'm still against it. I don't want this done in the schools. I don't care what you call it. This is wrong. Okay? So now they're kind of stuck because they've got you already off the whole, now you don't care if it's critical race theory. So now they're not defending critical race theory. Now they're like defending the practice of critical race theory in the schools. And you've sort of seeded the name, and they go to the strawman argument. The strawman argument is to the strawman argument. I'm gonna, that's an interesting point, Tony, and I'm gonna touch on that because that is actually an interesting point. Let me just real quickly go with the strawman thing. So the strawman thing is that I'm gonna say you're arguing something you're not arguing because it's ridiculous, and then attack that argument instead. The straw man, not attack the argument that you gave. Now let's see what Toasting Tony has to say. The argument was because Lincoln's main motive was to keep the country together and not end racism. That made him a racist or complicit in racism. It blew me away that non-action could make you racist. Okay, so that's interesting. He's right that the Emancipation Proclamation was not specifically because he wanted to free the slaves. In fact, he didn't free them in Maryland. Neat little tidbit that a lot of people don't know. Because they were neutral, it didn't apply to them, strangely enough. He wanted soldiers too. He thought that people would sort of leave the South and come fight for the Union. So he had some cynical motives at first. And he famously said that if he could keep the Union together without freeing a single slave, he would do it. However, he wanted to free the slaves because he knew it was evil, but that didn't mean he saw them as equals. So there are some solid arguments that Lincoln was a racist by the sort of old definition, the dictionary definition that we all thought we had until yesterday. You could say that Lincoln was one, but he still knew that it was wrong. It was immoral to put a man in chains. He did say that in Lincoln Douglas debates. He talked about that at length, while at the same time admitting that he didn't believe them to be his actual equals. He still said it doesn't matter. It's still wrong to keep them in chains. So, but the Emancipation Proclamation was not this great, like, I'm an anti-racist, so I'm freeing the slaves. So there's nuance in there. There's definitely nuance. But their point was that the amendment was never ratified, and it was. And so I wasn't really sure what they were going for there. Plus, since then, we've had the civil rights movement, and there's been a lot of progress. Are things perfect? No. But that brings me back to the straw man. The straw man argument that you typically hear is, you're against CRT, so you don't want to teach slavery. You don't want to teach about slavery. You don't want to teach about the true story of the American history. You don't want to teach about the ugly side of what happened. You would like to just sugarcoat it and be like, oh, that's in the deep past. We don't talk about that anymore. I have not heard anybody say that. I have no idea what they're talking about. In fact, all the parents that go up to talk about this and say, please, don't put CRT in the schools, or don't do this kind of segregated teaching. If you point blank them, and some of them have been point blank, they're like, I'm a Democrat, or I'm a progressive, or I put more in the school, like teach more real history. I'm not against that, but this isn't that. Like, in other words, having these racial essentialism lessons about something being intrinsic to whiteness, creating this concept or this construct called whiteness that magically encompasses all of the values, the sort of Western Enlightenment values that we thought were what made America great, in the whiteness thing, and attaching that to it. That's what people are opposing. They're not saying don't teach slavery. In fact, I was talking to somebody on Twitter today about this, and I said, it's such a straw man. Nobody is saying, in fact, it doesn't even pass the smell test. Why would we, especially in most of the country, like the North and the Pacific Northwest and places like that, why would we want to suddenly stop doing something we've been doing for about 50 years, which is teaching about slavery? That doesn't mean we can't do more. That doesn't mean that, like I said, that we can't do a better job of teaching history, of being more culturally inclusive in terms of our lesson plans, of sort of adding some things into the curriculum as far as the readings that we do, so that things aren't so uniform. I mean, it's probably due for an update. Like, nobody is saying that we can't have a conversation about how to improve our curriculum, how to improve schools, how to make things better. I think if you go back to last June or whenever it was when George Floyd was killed, I think the nation as a whole was like together. If ever there was a time to talk about police reform, changing the curriculum to be, to figure out if the schools could help in any way, I would have gone in a different direction. I would have gone towards literacy. Let's keep people out of jail. And the one common denominator of people in jail of all races is minimal literacy or complete illiteracy. It is the thing they have most in common. Second to, they committed a crime. So that would have been my direction. Like, what are we doing? Obviously, we're doing something really wrong, but we got to get into the weeds. We can't just do this massive overhaul. Okay. So, but that conversation never happened because very quickly, it was within a couple weeks from the black squares being on Instagram, we went all the way to, you don't really want to fight racism unless you want to overhaul the entire American system. And that's when a lot of people went, and they hit the brakes and just said, what? I'm sorry, what? Like, what's happening? And most of us didn't know what it was. Like, what is this happening? We thought it was just BLM. So a lot of people started to focus on, well, it's BLM and they're trained Marxists and all this kind of stuff. And we're like, focused on this. Meanwhile, critical race theory is doing its thing in the schools. Suddenly parents started seeing these lessons, looking over their kids' shoulders. It's like, what the heck? Now, in truth, this stuff has been in the schools for quite a while. They just started saying more quiet parts out loud, more quiet parts out loud. Equity became the big solution to all problems. And again, I think a lot of parents still fresh on the whole George Floyd thing and some other incidents were like, well, okay, the experts say this is what we have to do. Maybe this is what we have to do. But it's now a year later and we've learned a lot and we know what's going on. And okay, this is interesting. What does slavery have to do with equality? Aristotle was a slave. Well, we're not in ancient Greece anymore. And teaching that we did enslave people in the United States is part of our history. So if we're going to teach American history, we kind of have to cover it. If I believe that if you want to teach kids to appreciate the Constitution and appreciate the system we have here, you kind of have to teach the before and after. And you have to teach to like, look at what we were able to accomplish and relative to the rest of the world, hold on to in terms of human dignity and liberty and progress of human liberty. And it was in part because of these ideas, these Western Enlightenment ideas and the Constitution. So I think it has to do with teaching kids about what's good about America while teaching them what was bad about America, because they go kind of hand in glove. The seeds of slavery's demise were planted in the Constitution, but we're not talking about it from that point of view. We're talking about it solely from how the Constitution was imperfect. Well, yeah, it was 1789. So you can't apply today's values and today's, we have all that in the rearview mirror, all the things that happen and all that we know now. So you can't go back there and say, well, they should have done it the way we do it, because we only do the things we do because of everything we learned from their mistakes. So I'd prefer to look at it and say, let's look at the things they did right, whether intentionally or by accident. Okay, it's almost beside the point, although I do think the Three-Fifths Compromise was intentional. The first abolitionists came on the scene in 1775. So, that's important to talk about, that was there, that they were not going to give the South what the South wanted. They were not going to let them count people as people when they didn't get to vote. They weren't going to do that. So there were obviously people in enough of the country to prevent them from having that power that didn't want slavery to be perpetuated from early times. And it just unfortunately took, if you look at it all told, though, I think it's like 89 years, I think it's about 89 years where we had like slavery, like the kind of slavery that we were talking about. I'm not minimizing it. It's horrific. Horrific. Please don't hear me minimizing it. What I'm saying, though, is that we've had a lot of history since then where we have attempted as a people to keep moving forward. Not all of us, not all of the time. We're all imperfect, okay? But we keep going, and we are a self-reflective people. I believe we are inherently an anti-racist people, or we wouldn't be here at this point. But to say to people who want to fight critical race theory that we just don't want to teach slavery, or you don't want to teach about America's past, they keep using whitewash. And that just doesn't even make any sense. That's not what was being taught a year ago. Why the sudden push, this crisis, this need right now to get in there? And you've got to, when you hear that, that should tell you right now that you're not talking to somebody who is serious about reform of any kind. You're actually not talking to somebody who's remotely concerned about helping the people they claim to want to help. Because education, even if everything they said was true, even if a sizable percentage of Americans were the old-fashioned kind of racist, okay? Like Jim Crow racist. Literacy, if the law protected their equal rights, if we had the Civil Rights Act and the Civil Rights Law, and that was being enforced, if we could consistently enforce the law, and our schools consistently taught people to read and write and do math at, proficient levels, regardless of race, if that law was, we take that seriously, then if you had all kinds of white supremacists walking around going, whatever, whining, crying, bitching, moaning, it wouldn't hold anybody back a bit. It really wouldn't, because the people who could read, if Black people had all the exact same skills, they could go build their, like Jews did from time immemorial. Like, fine, you don't want to hire me? Build my own business, build my own bank, build my own hospital, build my own everything. Screw you. And I mean, it would suck. I'm not suggesting that is remotely appealing. I'm just saying that it's really a fallacy to say that like the only way you can help people is all this theoretical stuff and basically throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's throw out all of the Constitution and everything, including the Civil Rights Act, by the way. Let's throw it all out and start over again with what? I don't know. That's not for us to say. And if you don't want to do that, you just want to keep racism. You're just a white supremacist trying to uphold your power. I see that you don't want to, people to be equal to you. I mean, these are all straw man arguments, because it's a lot easier to claim victory over the supposed white supremacist than over a decent, reasonable person who simply disagrees with you about how to fight racism. If you just don't agree. And that's what I felt for Will. Will could, if he could have said this, or, if he'd been able to, they didn't let him get many words in edgewise, but if he had been able to say, I just disagree with you. I want to fight things the same. I want the same thing you want in the end. I want people to be treated equally. And I don't mean like we look at all the students and assume they're all starting in the same place and we don't do any scaffolding or don't help anybody who needs a little bit of extra help. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying under the law. Okay? And I want racism to be gone. I want people to understand what a ridiculously corrosive, collectivist, poisonous idea it is. But I think what you're doing is backwards. I think what you're doing is going to cause the opposite to happen, more racism. But you can't say that with people when they're strawmanning you because they just called you a white supremacist. So now you're going, I'm not a white supremacist. Well, that should be like, of course you're not. You're in the conversation. It's ridiculous on its face because true white supremacists would not sit down and deign to have a conversation with people like that. They would just be like, what do I got to do to make sure this person doesn't ever speak anywhere again? The fact that the rioters were allowed to just burn whole city blocks down the way they were and really very little happened to them is proof positive we're not a white supremacist nation, right? I mean, there's plenty of white people in Minnesota. It's just ridiculous. So when you hear a straw man, that person doesn't want to have a conversation with you. Like that first one you hear, the gaslighting, as abusive as it is, sometimes if you get past the gaslighting, go, look, I really don't care if, like that you're telling me it's not it. It is it. Now let's have a conversation about what it is. I don't want this in the school. They're kind of stuck. That's why they go to the straw man. So if they get there and they stay there, then the next thing they usually do is they go to the ad hominem attack. Like I said, you're a white supremacist. Well, you're a racist. So you don't want to fight slavery. Yes, I do. I really do. I just want to fight it differently. Well, if you want to fight it differently, then clearly you're just a white supremacist. This is just you trying to fight for your comfort. This is just you trying to like hold on to your power. White supremacist, ad hominem. They're just attacking you. And if you look at some of the comments even I've gotten, like I got some out on Will's YouTube, I've gotten them on Twitter, they go straight to ad hominem. Okay, Karen. Okay, white lady. Okay, you just want to keep your power. I'm like, my power? What power have I got? I got like 4 jobs. None of them make me enough money to like I barely pay my bills. I live okay because I'm married, but me personally, if anything happened to my husband, I'm doomed. Okay. So it's ridiculous. This idea that somehow I have this power that I'm going to hold on to because what? Because we don't do critical race theory in the schools? How does that give me power? How does it? Like they don't explain the mechanics of that. So it's an ad hominem attack because we know that most decent people don't want to be called a racist. Most decent people don't want to be called a white supremacist. Me, I'm at the point I don't care. Like I'm wearing my t-shirt, right? This is me. This is where I'm at in the evolution of these ideas. I'm just done. Like call me whatever you want to call me. That's fine. I know myself and I know my heart. And I know where I'm coming from. I actually do care. So they go to ad hominem. Now, here's something about the next one. The no true Scotsman is actually not a fallacy. Okay. It's technically not a fallacy, but they use it anyway. And the only reason I bring it up is the no true Scotsman is something people say, but it's not an argument. So that's why it's not a fallacy, because it had to be an argument or to be a fallacy, you have to actually be making an argument that's a fallacious argument. No true Scotsman is just sort of a purity test. It's kind of like a purity test, or it's a way of expressing, it's like moving the goalposts. It's more akin to moving the goalposts, where if, for example, you are not white and you oppose critical race theory, well, now you've lost your black card. You're not, no real black person, right? Then they talk about political blackness and just skin tone blackness, whatever. No true black person or no true fill in the blank would be against this, would be against critical race theory, or would support the white supremacy of, they're just trying to get their safety. They said yesterday, you want to be white adjacent for safety reasons. That no true black person would do that. That's just moving the goalposts away from like what you're allowed to think, or sorry, what is being black, for example. They'll just keep moving it and moving it and moving it until you are literally white. That's why they use the term phenotypically white, because now they want to make a delineation between people who look like me and people who could be, look like Pele, okay? Or if you remember who he is, but somebody very dark skinned, okay? And they could be called white because they're not phenotypically white, but they agree with me. So therefore, they're too white adjacent. And now we've just moved the goalpost away from even having your own identity. Like, you don't even get to be in the identity club. And these arguments are, well, that one's not an argument. It's just a ridiculous statement that is another way to sort of take you out of the conversation. You're not allowed to be in the conversation. But all of these guys, every single one of these can come up, can come in and out of conversations at the same time. Sometimes they're one and the same. They'll be doing, the No True Scotsman and ad hominem at the same time. It's like they'll be throwing so much at you. And it's really easy to get caught up in like fighting back. I got to get to some of these super chats. Hold on a second. Just here to show support. Thank you, Jeff. You're the best. You're awesome. Okay, so I'm appreciating the super chats, but somebody is telling me that I need to be religious. I appreciate your support, but I don't think that's going to help me much. Hang on a second. High time we stand up to these people calling us names instead of being silenced out of fear. Yes, very much so. Did I forget Alexandra? Oh, bye. Thank you so much. God, you guys are like super awesome, really. And about the Jesus, yeah, that's a whole other like conversation. Anyway, so I do want to talk a little bit about abuse, okay? Because gaslighting is a form of verbal abuse, but all of these other things can be too. A lot of, they're fallacious arguments and or non-arguments, but they're also abusive if they are accompanied by what we saw yesterday, which is that they're not even being civil. Civility is not just tone of voice, you guys. You can actually be very animated and very passionate and, even raising your voice a little bit and still be civil if you're respecting the other person's boundaries, respecting the fact that they're entitled to disagree with you and come back equally hard against you, like they're allowed to do it just right back. Now, raising your voice isn't really going to help anything, but let's say you get really passionate and you're like, this is so important or whatever. Okay, that doesn't make it uncivil in and of itself. But you can be speaking very quietly to somebody and go, does that make you feel better? Does that make you feel better to say that, Will? And you're condescending and you're just, you poor little sad white man. I mean, that is abusive. That's not how adults behave in civil discourse. And that's another form of, what they do with this, like gaslighting. I'm not going to use gaslighting words, but I'm going to put you in a frame of mind. I'm going to put you in a place. I'm going to talk to you in a way where I'm treating you like you're somebody you're not. And that's something I see them do all the time. I didn't miss Jeff's. Where did it go? I did see it. He says, this racism talk is nonsense. They try to justify it with more nonsense. Yes, I put it up. Did you miss me putting it up? I'm sorry. I did see it, Janice. So, what was I going to say? So when they come at you with a tone that doesn't match what just happened, as if to like shift in a different direction from where you are, that is also a form of abuse. You see like narcissists do it a lot in relationships where you're trying to have a serious conversation and you're voicing your opinion or your response to something they said. And instead of hearing you out or finishing and then coming back with something that vaguely resembles a response to what you just said, you just get this. That's problematic. That's really problematic. Yeah, that's going to be a problem. You don't even know what part of what I just said, right? So now you have to say, what did I do? You're on the defensive. What did I do? What did I say? And they could pick anything. They pick something out of a hat. They could pick nothing. They could say, oh, my shirt. I'm sorry. I thought I showed it to you. It says, stop making shit up. That's what it says. I bought it in Carlin's store. And I'm at that point in my evolution as a commentator. So let's see, what is this? Well, she really wasn't. she wasn't really given an argument there. Oh, I see. Okay. Actually, I do see it as evil. Believe it or not, atheists believe in evil. We do. It's just a different kind of evil. It's not as much a metaphysical evil as it is a form of, I mean, good and evil exist. That's a real thing. It's just whether you believe that there's a metaphysical being kind of pulling the strings on either side. But if I did believe, okay, if I did, then I would definitely classify this as satanic. No question about it. I mean, I've read enough scripture to know what is and isn't satanic. So you got me there. I'm not going to argue with you, but just, I just don't want to get into that. I will say, and I have said it before on this channel, that I do think a lot of people pushing critical race theory are trying to fill what I would call a God-shaped hole, in that they have an emptiness in their life. There is something very missing. There's probably even a little bit of mental illness in some of them, personality disorders. It scoops a lot of people up. And I think it's dark. It's really dark. And when I say, God-shaped hole, like, you don't have to necessarily be a believer in a spiritual being to recognize a hole in your psyche or a hole in your spirit or whatever essence that needs to be filled. I happen to fill it differently with philosophy. I have a different philosophy, but if religion is your philosophy, that's awesome. I just suggest that people have a core, because you need to have solid grounding in your own morals, your own values, your own beliefs. You need to be rock solid in order to stand up to this kind of disease. Because if you're wishy-washy on that, if you're not really sure where you stand in the whole good versus evil, moral versus immoral, ethical versus unethical, or if you stray into the ends justify the means territory, you could get sucked right up into this, and it wouldn't take much. It really wouldn't take much. So, and it is a pseudo religion. It is. The only thing missing from it is a figure, like a leader. They have a bunch of little priests and priestesses or whatever. They have Robin DiAngelo and Kimberly Crenshaw and Derek Bell and, Ibram X. Kendi and all these people that, varying degrees, people say, yes, that is actually a bona fide priest or priestess. No, they're not, whatever. But that's what they are. But there's no one strong leader, like a Jim Jones, whatever, of a cult, but they still are a cult. They operate like a cult. What we saw happen to Will was like a cult. What cults do, like, we're going to wear you down. We're going to wear you down. We're going to wear you down until you just feel so exhausted that it's, just easier to go along with what other people are saying, and especially if you have to keep your job, or if you just don't want to, get into fights with people, you kind of go along with it or whatever. It's just something that they do. When you hear people type you, when you've not done that, like, you didn't use pronouns, you didn't put, I'm a cishet, blah, 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 but people say it to you, that's them trying to group you and cluster you and other you so that you lose your individualism. You lose your individuality. If that is another thing cults do, that is what all of these collectivists do. That's why they're trying to do it to our children. By having our children group identify, they're trying to steal their individual sense of self, so that they can be more easily manipulated, molded, turned into little junior activists and salespeople for critical race theory, so that they will literally come back home and attack you, attack your whole family, attack you, attack your values. Suddenly they will see the values you're trying to impart to them as indoctrination. They'll actually come home and say, you're trying to indoctrinate me in this. And that'll tell you they're fully indoctrinated, because a healthy child might be able to say to you, Mom, Dad, and we're talking, let's say, college age at this point, I just don't agree. I'm sorry. I love you, but I'm not going to do the thing or believe the thing or go to the thing or whatever, whatever. But if they come back all defensive, like, you just don't love me for my real self and all this, and like throw at you their identities, that is not someone who's very sure of who they are and just disagrees and wants to live their own life as an individual. That's somebody who's clinging to a different family. They're clinging now to their little church of the critical race theory family. That's how cult members behave if they ever see their family, like with venom. So, Evergreen College, that looked very much like a cult. And what you see now is you see an attempt to turn all of our K-12 schools into Evergreen, and turn the parents into the couple of professors who are like, this sucks. We don't want this. And the way they were treated is the way all the parents are being treated now. So I'm hoping that if you can start to think of it as abuse, if you can start to see that it's all a game of psyops, it's all an attempt to manipulate you, break you down, that you'll be able to withstand it. The other thing that I'm hoping you can take away from, if not this live, then some of my other videos, is that the time to have conversations with them about what they believe and about what they're doing is long over. It's over. We've seen it. We know what it is. It doesn't matter what you call it. It doesn't matter where it shows up as far as what the naming convention is in the curriculum. If they're calling it social emotional learning, if they're calling it diversity, equity, inclusion, if they're calling it critical race theory, whatever it is. If it takes the position that America is an inherently racist country, root to tip, that our founding documents are grounded in white supremacy, that the 1619 Project has value as historical study. Okay. And I don't care it's journalism. Then why are you teaching it in social studies? But it's just another way to examine our history. No, it's not. It's a wrong way. It's a wrong way. It is literally as if you would have creationists. No offense to the Christians in the audience, but if creationism were coming into the schools and supplanting in the science department and being taught first as science, and then maybe they would give a nod to evolution, like maybe. And then saying, no, it's just another way to teach how we all got here. It's just another way. That's what they're doing with 1619 Project. That is the best analogy I can come up with. Is it's really her idea that is not grounded in reality. She takes one true thing. 1619, the first boat of Africans came. Okay. Everything after that pretty much is just completely bogus. And they're teaching it as history. Do you think a kid with their first interaction with American history is going to come away going, well, that was an interesting journalistic exercise? It doesn't even fit, right? What, journalism? How is it journalism? Oh, it's an essay. I don't care what format the writing is. If you are saying that capitalism was invented to perpetuate slavery, if you're saying that we fought the Revolutionary War to keep slavery, if this was what you're saying, then you're wrong. Like, that's not history, and it shouldn't be taught as such. So that's another form of gaslighting, where they're like, no, the 1619 Project is just journalism. What are you talking about? No, that's not it. That's not what it is. Why are you teaching it in history class? What? It's social studies. Wait, it's social science. Like, there's it's like a distinction without a difference. You're not teaching it alongside other stuff about the revolution, interestingly enough. So they're gaslighting your kids. If you had a kid that like went to a different school and then they go into a school and they're doing this thing, wait, I that's not what I learned. I don't know what you're talking about. This isn't it. Oh, well, that other stuff. Yeah, no, this is the right thing. So you gotta just understand that what you care about, or what you should care about, is what are they teaching? What are they teaching? It's like, I don't care what you call it. It's wrong. And if somebody comes then back at you with like, well, so you just don't want to teach this topic at all? Be like, oh no, absolutely. I totally do. Just not this way. Just keep saying, I definitely do. Not this way. And if they make you elaborate and say, you know what, we can have a conversation about that, but I don't need to go to that yet. The point is, you need to prove to me, the parent, the stakeholder, the taxpayer, it's your job actually to sell me on this. And you failed. You failed. So you failed. Turn it back on them. Stop defending why you don't want it. And this is obscene to me. The teachers and curriculum developers and these companies, and that's what they are. They're companies that are using our tax money to make a lot of money. They're grifters, and they're pushing this into the school and saying, all these people that don't want to buy my product, they're terrible racists. I'm sorry, you didn't sell me on your freaking product. I'm not buying. I don't like it. If you went to a restaurant and they go, you want this? No, I don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't. So you're not hungry then. I'm really hungry, but you haven't sold me on the spinach cakes or whatever. Just, you have to go back and make them tell you why it's so awesome. And in simple terms, like a moron could understand. Don't do this like, well, frameworks, this, blah, 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 word salad. Blah, blah, blah. No. Here's what I want to know. How are the kids going to read better? How does this help them achieve literacy? Tell me how you're going to take 35% and make it 90% using this. Oh, wait. Okay. How are you going to take math and make math go up too for everyone across the board using this. And don't tell me that first you have to dismantle racism. The kids don't have that long to wait. You can't do it that fast. Even if it worked, it wouldn't work that fast. So this first I have to dismantle racism is just a lie. So no, sorry, that makes it a sucky product. If your product, public school, is the success of your product is predicated on now having a whole other product come in and do a bunch of work on the children, turn them into social activists, and then what? They got to graduate with no reading ability, go out, pound the pavement, burn a few city blocks down, and then maybe school can work now? What is your point? You can't, and it's also a lie, you guys. I have a video. You can go search it. It's back on the day that I published it the day after Walter Williams died. His last column was about how the crisis or the tragedy rather, in Black education is new. It's brand spanking new. When he was a kid in segregated Jim Crow South, okay? The kids at the high schools in Baltimore were graduating, getting PhDs, forget proficient, they were geniuses. There were all Black schools that were public schools that were turning out students that were leaps and bounds ahead of their white peers at the same socioeconomic level. Not across the board everywhere, but the same socioeconomic level, like up here. So it is a lie, straight up capital L lie, that you must dismantle racism before teaching these kids to read. Total lie. And that's assuming the level of overt racism, this terrible crisis that they're describing, was even real. And it's not. It's a figment. To listen to Shivy talk yesterday, you would think that you're a Black man and you step foot outside your door, you're just going to be cut down in an instant. Doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter where you are. Just you're Black. Boom. You might just die. That's just not statistically accurate. It's just not. And they want to perpetuate this myth that there's this horrible crisis. No, we have a lot of other crises, but that's really not one. Does that make it not a problem? No. In fact, the one thing that hasn't come out of this whole year, we have not seen any real effort made towards police reform. George Floyd happened, and I'm not going to do a whole video on, him as a person or any of that, but okay, he died under the knee of a cop. The guy has now been tried and he's going to prison, or maybe he'll have another trial. I don't know what's going to happen with that. I'm not an analyst in that regard. But what police reform has happened? If that was the goal of any of this, zero. Don't you think that we're going to get more progress on preventing those kinds of events, if that's the goal, by dealing with it directly, than by saying, oh, we got to revamp the whole education system and get rid of all racism? And that seems like a really slow way, you guys, to save lives. I don't know. I mean, call me crazy, but I think that seems really inefficient. It seems to me you'd want to get into the police departments at the ground level and start talking about what kind of training do you guys need to improve this? So we need to bring back community policing, do a better job of hiring, what's going on? How widespread is this really? Let's analyze it. No, critical theorists don't want to analyze at the nitty gritty level about policy. They just want to just burn, slash and burn it all down and start over why? Because they hate this country. They hate the country. They want to burn it down. That's all you need to know. They hate the country. They'll say, oh no, I love America, except that I hate it. I love America, except all the ways I want to change it to be a completely different country. More gaslight, or not. They're just lying there. I know it's not gaslighting. They're lying. They're straight up lying. So I love the country. Burn the Constitution. The Constitution is the country. The country's not a line on a map. The country's not a bunch of places and city names and even buildings. That's not the country. The country is the document. That's the only thing that makes America special, if you ask me. I mean, there's some pretty places to go and some nice people and whatever. But without that Constitution and without the rights that it guarantees in there, we're just another country. I mean, that's what makes us different. That's why people come here from war-torn places where they have actual tyranny, where they actually are at risk of dying and they step foot outside their door. They come here. Does that mean it's perfect? No. But, like he was trying to say, it's better. And that was one of the worst straw man arguments I saw yesterday, was when he said it's better to be Black in America than any other place. He didn't mean, I'm sure he didn't. I mean, I haven't had a conversation with him and I know he didn't mean this. He didn't mean Like they're going to be happier in every possible respect. He just meant statistically on paper. And he was probably referencing Weeze's thing from earlier, like an hour earlier, where she goes, you can take a zip code and you can define exactly how someone's life is going to go by what zip code they live in. That was his point. That was his point. If any of those zip codes are in the United States of America and you're Black, chances are, like odds are, like maybe 85, 90% that your life is pretty good and better than living in 9/10 of the rest of the planet. That was his point. And you could still debate that, honestly. You could still say, I disagree, and let's get into it. And let me show you how that's not actually true. And, we'll look at the statistics together in a civil way that maybe he'd learn something, maybe the other person learned something, and then he could go back into his class and still be an optimist, but just use a different example. But they acted like he'd committed some horrendous racist crime to even suggest that being Black in America might be better than horrible. And that's just ridiculous. That's ridiculous. So all you need to know is that their view is fatalistic, pessimistic, 100% revolutionary, Marxian at the very least. I don't want to go all the way to say Marxist, because I do believe that these people have a fantasy about just flipping the switch and having like everyone who currently has things doesn't, and they get all the stuff, which is a little different than communism. Like the people who wanted to have communism wanted the state to own everything. And they were like, yeah, I don't care if I'm a worker and I do the work, whatever. They don't want to work. They don't want to work. They don't want to get their little manicure dirty. She had to use her hands to lecture us. No, they want you to do the work and be their slaves. That's what they want. They don't hate slavery. They just don't want to be workers. They want you to be slaves. They want revenge. And when I say you, I mean anyone other than them. It's not specifically white people. It's anyone who disagrees with them. It's like, who do I have to convince that I'm right and be on my team so we can take from the other people? I used to jokingly say revenge of the C students, but that's not really very fair because a lot of wonderful people were C students. But a lot of these people, what you'll find, are lightweights. They're intellectual lightweights. They're not very bright. They're not very articulate. They're not very smart in even the most conventional way. You wonder what they could be successful at productive work if they didn't have this grift to go to, if they didn't have academia to support them, to pay them to just blab all day. What would they actually do? Who do they actually help? They don't really do anything. And I don't think they really like themselves, a lot of them, because it comes out. It's like this envy, resentment thing. So that's why I say I think there's like some personality disorders going on. But I don't think they really want communism. I think they just want somebody to tell them it's okay to steal. That's what I think. So, I mean, I could be wrong. I'm not really like that into the politics of it. I'm just looking at it as a cultural analyst, if you will, education analyst. And I think they are trying to hoodwink us into believing that the massive cover-up that they're doing now on critical race theory in order to get it into the schools so it can cover up the failure of the schools is our fault. Like, it's our fault. We're, it's not what we think it is. We just don't want to teach about slavery and the dark past of America. And that makes us white supremacists and evil, terrible people. By the way, every single thing I just said is true of them. The country they think they see isn't the country that they think they see or they claim to see. So, but I'm not gaslighting them to say that. They really are not seeing reality. And the argument that they think that we're making is the argument they're making. They don't really want to teach reality. They're the ones who don't want to teach our actual history. They want to rewrite history to fit their little narrative, but so they accuse us of wanting to do that. Flip it over. As far as the white supremacy thing, what's more white supremacist than believing that Black people need white people to do things in order for them to be successful? Than believing that all of the things that make civilization possible, okay, advancements in science and technology and civil society and engineering and like all of it that brought us a vaccine in a year, all of those things, whether you agree with the vaccine or not, I don't want to hear about it. I'm just saying that could do that. All of that, they're saying that's whiteness. How insulting. How insulting. One of the mathematicians that was one of the most brilliant mathematical minds the United States has ever produced was a black man in the 1700s, before, like, when there was slavery. It was in the North, but I'm just saying, like, that's obviously not whiteness. And then they'll say no because he used the white man's tools. And I'm like, yeah, to make it possible for us to know about that kind of math. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. I also don't think that the Arabs or the people in, where we got a lot of math concepts are what I would call white, but they're saying it's whiteness. So it's ridiculous to me. They're turning everything upside down. The white supremacists are actually the people who are saying that race is essential. Race is this essential component that without that, that defines you. So, and if you're going to attach all of the things about civilization to whiteness, that seems like white supremacy to me, unless you're suddenly going to tell me that all those things actually don't work, which is another form of gaslighting. Because I'm pretty sure that things like, reason and logic and science and the scientific method and the written word, which is a fairly efficient way of communicating, if you ask me, as opposed to oral tradition. How is that bad? How does that not work? And then they'll say, well, these are dominant narratives. And I said it yesterday. I'm like, so what? Just because something is dominant doesn't make it bad. A lot of times things become dominant because they work, because they're good. We drive cars now. We don't ride horses anymore. I wonder why we're car dominant. We live in houses. We don't live in little teepees and tents. I wonder why that is. Lots of things, lots of ideas become dominant. Then we probably should educate our children instead of making them go work in factories and fields from the time they're 3 years old. We teach them to read and write. I wonder why that's dominant. Must be whiteness. I mean, there was a reason they said slaves couldn't learn to read. No, it's illegal. Don't teach them to read. Frederick Douglass knew that. I keep saying that on this channel because the man doesn't get enough attention. If it were up to me, they say, you don't want to teach slavery. Frederick Douglass would be the name of half the high schools. Frederick Douglass would be the person I would spend most of my time on. My kids in the class would be reading his autobiography and biographies about him. I mean, why are we not making role models out of actual heroes, out of people who actually rose above their circumstances in spite of oppression, and took off and said, I'm free. You can't stop me. You can hate me. You can curse at me. You can, try to hurt me, but I'm a free man or woman or whatever. We knew this like in the 60s. Hollywood produced Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. This is one of the most enlightened films I've seen in such a long time. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. This was with Sidney Poitier and Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy. And there's such a beautiful scene where he's there with his father, Sidney Poitier's character, and he's a doctor. He's achieved so much. He's traveled around the world educating people. And his father, who was a mailman his whole life and put him through college and everything, said, was very angry. He's marrying a white woman. How can you do this after everything I've done for you? How can you do this? And he says, your problem, Dad? He says, when you look at me, you see a black man. When I look at myself, I see a man. And that was in the 60s. That was in the 1960s in America. And it was a successful film. And people loved it. And it's considered a classic now. And people still watch it. And they still love it in this this terribly racist country where we're such white supremacists. White supremacists would see that movie and go, uppity. That's what white supremacists would do. They wouldn't even go to a movie like that. They'd boycott that movie. They would say that was the beginning of all degradation of society. That's what actual white supremacists would do. Apparently, the white supremacists, the critical race theorists made a movie about intermarriage. I mean, we've gone from, being a people who, and in that movie also looked at the flaws. It looked at racism, examined it critically. And we've gone from people who could do that through entertainment in a subtle way, in a realistic way. And actually you'd come away not only seeing a wonderful story with beautiful characters that you cared about, you didn't feel lectured, you didn't feel finger pointed at, you didn't feel anything, you didn't feel shame, you didn't feel guilt, you just felt like thoughtful, like, that's a really good point. I mean, my dad told me when he saw that movie, he's like, I mean, he didn't need to be taught, but he said he knew people that came away from that movie who were like, that's a really good point. I'm changed in my thinking from this. Okay. Not everyone, but a lot of people. And we've gone all the way 2021. Finger wagging, terrible person, evil person, pray to the gods of critical race theory. We've gone backwards. We've gone backwards in terms of our ability to think critically and solve problems. These people don't want to solve problems. They don't even want to have arguments. They just want to browbeat you into submission. This is about submission. I'm sorry, I've forgotten some super chats here. As a white non-racist, the only thing that CRT teaches me that is beneficial to be white. I mean, if you're a Darwinist, then having an advantage is good. That's a very good point. I think I said something yesterday to that effect. That did I miss any others? Gosh, I hope I didn't. I'm so sorry. That's a really good point, because when people come at you saying, you just want to hold on to your privilege, you have white privilege, you just want to keep it up, people are going to go, well, wouldn't I? Like, I mean, if you're telling me that I have this thing that helps me live life easier, well, life's been pretty hard lately for a lot of us, right? They keep it up. They're going to convince us to want to keep it. They're going to convince a subset anyway of people. Not everybody's going to become Dr. Kate. I need to figure out how to divest myself of the privilege that I've had. Well, you just go on with your self-hating self. You know, most rational people, if they have some kind of advantage, doesn't even make them hateful. Just makes them rational. They're going to say, well, you know, I'm going to use that. Because using an advantage is not the same as oppressing someone else. They would like to make them the same. That's how they get into the heads of decent people, that they tell you it's an either or. It tells you that, you know, I can't leverage my advantage without taking from someone else. It's just not true. It's just not true. Now, in some instances, if you really know that you have an advantage because of your race, that I personally wouldn't want to take advantage of that. But if you're talking about like, I can come and go easily from places or whatever, how do I divest myself of that? Should I like intentionally move to a neighborhood where I'm a minority so I can feel stressed and tension, like in every encounter is very tense? Is that how I divest myself of my privileges? Because that's just stupid. I mean, that's just dumb. If I am living in a safe neighborhood where I feel at home and I feel like my neighbors aren't going to hate me, I'm going to stay there because I have kids and I don't want to die. And I think most people feel the same. So you're asking people to self-harm to a point if you're saying give up, you know, if that's really true, if their supposed privilege is true. And some of the other privileges, because I don't know I have them, or I didn't ask for them, or they're actually not real, like the job one is BS. And I can tell you from personal experience, I've been told to my face, I'm sorry, I can't send you out on interviews because you're white. And I actually asked the recruiter, I said, I'm so glad to be able to finally tell this story because this happened to me in 2012 and people didn't believe me. I told a few people and they were like, that's not true. They wouldn't do that. That didn't happen. And I'm like, but it did. And she knew that I would tell people and they wouldn't believe me. And I, you know, because I asked her, I said, how are you not afraid I'm going to go tell people? And she goes, she didn't say it snarkily. She said it actually apologetically. She said, well, white people can't be on the receiving end of racism. So it's not racist that we're doing this. We have to fill diversity quotas. And I was like, and you're just telling me. And she's actually like being nice. She goes, well, I just thought you'd want to know because then you can tailor your search around, you know, companies that maybe are a little smaller because sometimes a smaller company, they don't have a quota to meet, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I mean, this was literally told to me to my face. Now I tell people and they're more inclined to believe me. They're like, oh yeah, I think I've heard of a few other people having that happen to them. Or it happened to someone in their family because it's happening a lot lately. So if there was privilege in the job thing, I just saw a story today about a guy who was in the NFL told him he wasn't the right kind of minority because he's Asian to be a football coach. I mean, they're saying this out loud now. So shut up with your white privilege crap. There's now a privilege to not being white. If you can look, Weeze was like all about her, you know, I'm not white. And I bet you there are people who would look at her and they would be like, I mean, she's kind of brownish, but like they wouldn't really know, right? I don't think she has the same degree of like that Shivy has of being a noticeably black man, but there are a lot of people who want on that bandwagon. Remember Rachel Dolezal? Why did Rachel Dolezal want to be black? Why does Kamala Harris call herself the first black vice president? Because we're a white supremacist nation? How did that help her and help the ticket get elected because we're a white supremacist state. It's ludicrous on its face. But they're turning it all upside down. And I'm just sick of it. So I came out here to, and there's more stuff, to talk to you guys about these things because I want you to, if you're feeling like this, if you're like, I feel like I'm being gaslit, or wait, was that a strawman argument? Yeah, you're right. It is. And we saw it yesterday. But it's also a reason you should engage because it's all abuse. It's abusive. Not all by itself, but with the way they do it, the way they throw it in, it's abusive. So when you're dealing with abusers, the simple answer is don't. To the extent that you can avoid it, don't engage. I can't remember who it was on Twitter. They said, I'm not engaging. I'm not talking anymore to the people who are against me, to the opponents of, to the people who want critical race theory in the schools. I am only talking to the people who need to hear this message and trying to fortify them, trying to empower them to speak up and speak out, speak past. If you go to a school board meeting and there are people there, pointing fingers, calling you racist, whatever, don't speak to them. If you have to stand up and speak after them, don't address what they just said. Just ignore it like it didn't happen. It didn't happen. It's not about you. Okay? So you can just stand there and speak your piece. I do not want anything in the classroom that says the Constitution is a white supremacist document. I do not want anything coming into my child's classroom that tells my child that the color of their skin is the most important thing about them and that they need to identify their identities to the teacher or anybody else in the room. I want them called by their name and that's it. I do not want anything coming into my child's classroom that says that we've made no progress since 1619 and that we need to overhaul the entire country. I do not want anything coming into the classroom that says that, the only way to teach our history is the 1619 Project and critical race theory. Any of these statements, you just got to say how you don't want it taught. I don't want this being taught. I don't want this happening. And if they go, well, you want to suppress freedom of speech. Newsflash, teachers don't have freedom of speech in the classroom, guys. They do not. They are government employees. And I can assure you in a private school, they don't have freedom of speech. I couldn't go into a Catholic school. Let's say I taught in a Catholic school and I once got offered a job in a Catholic school. And that's when I was more observant Jewish. I could not go into a Catholic school and start saying, yeah, so there's Jesus isn't a thing. And no way, nor would I. If I took that job, I'm taking that job with the rules of the job. And the rules of the job are that I don't talk about it. If I'm not teaching a religion class, which they told me I wouldn't have to teach, I'm teaching my subject straight up. That's it. These kids don't know my opinions about anything, nor should they. It's none of their business. And their parents are paying for me to do it. So I'm hired speech. I'm hired speech. It doesn't mean they should control every single word out of my mouth. But if I'm a professional and they hired me to do a certain job, I got to do that job. It's not my playground. It's not my classroom to go in and just do whatever I want. Now, having said that, there's a middle ground between somebody, because right now there are teachers like Will and like I would be, who are being told, you will teach critical race theory or else. The middle ground is the teacher has to have enough autonomy to do what's ethically and morally right, okay, in their classroom. So if a school comes along and says you must do something bad or wrong, like don't teach phonics, the teacher needs to be able to decide, my kids need phonics. Like, I need to teach these kids phonics. They're not going to learn to read if I don't. So that's when you're not being treated like a professional. So we need to find that space again where teachers are professional teachers. They're not activists. They're not just a hired hand to like spit stuff out. They are professionals, trained professionals who understand the students come first. They work for the students and their parents, and the school just happens to write their paycheck. But the paycheck comes from the parents. That's where the money comes from. But in the teachers' colleges, being taught by people like Dr. Kate, they're being told, your teaching is a political act, and you need to right the wrongs of racism, and you need to go in with the critical race theory lens that blurs reality, and you need to teach everything through that lens and teach the students to find the racism in everything. Where's the racism? I'm sure it's in here. Where's the racism? As if finding racism solves racism. Nope. I would even go so far as to say that there might be an argument for how ignoring racism to a certain extent in certain places, in certain contexts, might be the way to end it. Not giving it any oxygen might be the way to end it. The problem with constantly talking about something, pointing it out and finding it is it creates resentment, it creates anger, it creates frustration, it creates all kind of negative feelings that can cause those people feeling those feelings to feel animosity towards somebody of a different race, and we play the yo-yo game. If you'd like to see where that ends, take a gander over to the Middle East. Pretty sure we don't want that happening here, do we? So tribalism of those kinds is just terrible. It's never going to end. That's going to end when somebody in Palestine finally, in the Palestinian territories, sits down and says, this is some bullshit right here. Like, can we just ignore it and just move on with our lives? Can we just get on with our lives? They're there. They're not going anywhere. They got bigger guns. They're not going anywhere. Let's just get on with our lives, teach our kids, and live life. Nope. As long as the most important thing to you is winning and all that, it's going to keep going. And that's what they're teaching our children to do. They're teaching our children that they can't be happy and life can't be right and they can't be free until they've gotten rid of all the racism. That's not possible. You can't get rid of racism. Racism, like all forms of collectivism, is a really bad idea, a pernicious, poisonous idea that is going to live in the mind of someone, some disgruntled person somewhere forever and always. And every time there's someone who wants a little bit of power, they're going to stoke that fire and get out their billows and they're going to make some more oxygen on that flame. We see it every day. The race hustlers. Okay, so what does this says? If you're a Darwinist and you believe that animals have advantages, is the lioness racist against the zebra? Okay. No. And yes, animals have advantages, but I don't know that I'm a Darwinist because I don't know that I think we're exactly like animals. And I don't know enough about Darwin and Darwin's theories to really pontificate about it, but I do think that people adapt. Living creatures adapt to their environment, and to the extent that humans have adapted, we are not well served in terms of our evolution and our continuing evolution by being held back or by being told that we can't succeed. Because I think Carlin pointed it out that if you believe you can succeed at something, if you believe that you have potential, that is one of the key ingredients to actually succeeding. If you believe you can't, you're right. And I know it sounds like a motivational poster, but it just happens to be true. And I've seen it in students. I've seen students who were not as intellectually adept, okay? If you're looking at just straight up ability, raw talent, who did better than students who were brilliant, who didn't apply themselves because they just didn't think they could do it. They were just like, I'm never going to achieve what I want to achieve. And what's the point? They have some kind of imposter complex, or they're perfectionists. They're actually afraid of success, or they're afraid of failure. So they fail so they can, they don't try so they can not feel like they failed. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, that I hate that little equity thing or the equity tree, because it assumes that everyone born with an advantage, like the lion, okay, it assumes everyone born with a certain advantage or born allegedly on Easy Street is going to leverage those advantages 100% all the time. Not even every lion is a good hunter, which is why sometimes they get run out of the pride. So you can be the superior, being, so to speak, or have the advantages and throw them away. I've seen it. I've seen it with my own eyes. I did grow up a little bit more privileged than the average bear, but I saw people I went to school with. They had very rich parents, way richer than lots of money, stupid money. And they just sat around and smoked pot and didn't do anything and didn't go to class and just frittered their life away. Not because they were going to have money to take care of themselves after the fact, just because they just didn't perceive need. And to a certain extent, having the need to succeed fuels people. It's actually helpful to not have everything and every need supplied for. So this is a fallacy, the snapshot fallacy, that where you are is where you'll stay. The equity pushers use that all the time. And they'll use that as an excuse to get rid of advanced math and other programs. They'll say, well, they'll be fine because they're really smart. You can be Einstein, but if you don't apply that, you're going to end up living in a cardboard box under the elevated, okay? You have to actually apply or take advantage or go out and grab onto your opportunities. And if there's any reason for you not to, you just get fail anyway because, whiteness. You don't want to even do that stuff. You don't want to do that. That's white. That's white. You want to get good grades? That's too white. You want to do that? That's white. You don't want to succeed. You want to be good at math and science, but that's white. And John McWhorter wrote a really good piece about that a couple weeks ago about how people don't want to talk about that, but that's a very real thing. That's a cultural thing that we don't talk about it, but it's a thing. And they're not helping when they say that all the trappings of, academic success and Western civilization and, all that's whiteness. Why is somebody who wants to identify with their identity, because now we got to identify with well, you're not really Black. You got to identify with your identity for safety and all this. Why are you going to go do the white stuff? They're literally tying lead weights around these kids' ankles and saying, run, take off, do well in school. That it's crazy to me. So whenever these people say, well, you're just a racist, you don't want kids to succeed, then I'm just sitting there. Wait, monks purposely aim low. Hi. When they tell me I don't care about these kids, or I'm just trying to stop the wheels of progress, I don't want to get rid of racism, I'm like, you're in my way. Like, I want to get rid of it, and you're literally in my way. That's my problem with you. And they don't want to hear it. There's one way to solve it, they say. Even Dr. Kate said yesterday, she said to Will, but without critical race theory, how are you going to fight racism? And I almost felt sorry for her. For like a split second, I felt sorry for someone who so truly believes that the only way to fight the scourge of racism is with her theory that she gets paid to teach. I believe she really believes that. That's what's sad. I think she really believes that. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is a college professor who teaches teachers. And she has the one solution, pals. There's only one. And we must apply it to every problem. Can you imagine? And then you call that critical thinking because you think that criticizing everything is critical thinking? That's not what critical thinking is. Critical thinking is when you think towards a goal. And you use this process, like in my video the other day, you use a very specific step process to work towards a goal, usually to solve a problem or to make a decision. Those are the reasons that we use critical thinking. And that's not it. Saying, I'm going to apply a lens and find the racism. And then when I see the racism, I'm going to find more racism. And then I'm going to find the people to point fingers at about the racism, lather, rinse, repeat. What got solved? And then she says, well, you're concerned about policy, Will. You're concerned about policy. This is what we have to do first. And that's where I was like, I almost got drawn in. I was like, well, hang on a second. If that's what you were doing, if you really were going to look at affirmative action policy and you were going to say, okay, why isn't this working? And you were going to be open to all possible answers as to why it wasn't working and why, when you took it away, the numbers drastically dropped, like why that happened. If you could actually have an honest conversation about all the potential reasons for that, then I might be interested in critiquing or critically analyzing that. But if you're telling me that you're going to critically examine it and go, disparity of outcome, racism, got to put affirmative action back in place 100%. And, now, except this time we have to remove white women from the equation. There, solve the problem. That's not solving the problem. You didn't really examine why it failed. You just decided it was this. And that skips a lot of steps. So that's, okay, Patrick is here. I want to see what Patrick has to say. Professor, as a physics college professor, I have come to realize that critical thinking is very rare in college and university professors, even in pure science. That is very, very depressing, Patrick. It's rare in the professors. Can you put in the chat? It's rare in the professors, like not just the kids. And in physics, guys, we're in trouble. Like physics is one of those things that I sort of count on, math, physics, things that seem to be some of the most objective disciplines you could possibly find. I mean, bridges get built, guys. Like, I don't want to drive over a bridge someday and wonder if it's going to collapse because equity. And I mean, I don't say that. Yes, that's what I meant. He says, oh, dear God. Okay. Patrick, how hard is it to speak up in your discipline when you see that happening? As a professor, do you worry that you will lose your job if you say that that's what's happening, that they're not thinking critically? Because that's really scary. Oh, dear God. Yeah. So I did a video the other day about math. There was a piece in a Substack, and it was about how we're flunking math, and it was written by college math professors. and they said much the same. They said we are dumbing down math. We are making it so that we will not have the STEM capabilities to support our society, our modern society, and we will just be at the mercy of. Yes, physics does have phenomena. You're right. That's true. But I guess when I think of applied physics, like currently, the people who would go study it and then actually apply it in their jobs, things that we need to have, and even the discovery, even the stuff that we need to continue discovering to keep moving forward, to understand those phenomena, we're not going to have it if we just promote people because of representative diversity. And the problem is, whenever I even hear myself say that, I know I can hear the echo of the critical race theorist in my head saying, so you don't want more people from, diverse backgrounds to be in these fields? My answer is, I don't know. My answer is not necessarily. In other words, I don't believe in representative democracy, or not democracy, representative diversity. I think that diversity has to be of like your viewpoints and your outlook and your approach to solving problems, not what you look like or what country your ancestors came from or what language you speak. That's not really diversity. You could end up with a physics department where everybody thinks exactly the same because they all agree that the most important thing is what you look like. So the type of person who would think something so illogical is one kind of person. Usually a collectivist, usually a person who's not very adept at rational thought. So, because a rational thinker knows that has no meaning, It's superficial. It's nothing. So, if I ended up with a physics department that was 90% white for the moment, because that's what it was, those are the people who were qualified to be there, but they came from all different viewpoints and so forth, so be it. Then I think the next thing you do is you say, all right, well, what can we do? Because there are geniuses out there from every conceivable, background. What can we do to find them? Not create them out of whole cloth like you'll do, but actually go find them where they are in their, lower grades and find ways to cultivate their brilliance and their talent in those advanced programs, in those advanced schools. Let there be school choice so that the parent, because oftentimes parents kind of know, or maybe a teacher sees it, find a way that a teacher, this is if you hire professional teachers who actually care about student success, that's a prerequisite. Those teachers can see that kid in the rough and say, I've got a friggin' math genius here. This kid's 7 and he's already asking me for much more difficult math. What do I do? And that's going to happen across races. That just is. They're out there. And then if there's some place for that kid to go, they're not trapped in this horrible school in the middle of Baltimore where there's nothing and no one is going to even do anything for them. They need to be plucked up out of there and put where they need to be. And if we could work on that and finding and cultivating the genius all over the place, you would end up with that kind of diversity, but it would also be viewpoint diversity. It would also be diversity of talent. And you really would be more equitable then, because you would be saying, we need to make sure that all the talent in America has equal access to develop its talent. So we're going to go out and find it. It's not that we're going to take everyone in a given school in a geographic location and just, make sure they all get A's. Look, now they all have A's. That's not equity. It's just equity of failure. Somebody once said to me, you to try to pursue equity in a single school like that, in a single classroom or whatever, it's like trying to get a better, greener lawn by, mowing the grass. That's what they're going to do. They're just going to use a lawnmower. Now they have equity. When you actually need someone to come along with fertilizer and so forth and so on, but you can't do that in a single classroom. You really can't. It's not set up for that. The incentives aren't there. The structure isn't there. It's not there. The best you can hope for is talent scouts. And why don't we have that? Why don't we literally they have sports? They have friggin' talent scouts that go out to schools and high school. And I would go sooner for math and science because it tends to show up pretty soon. And I would have talent scouts that are going out from specialized schools or specialized programs within a district looking for those kids Where are they? Teacher, who's the best kid in your class? I want to see them. And not just shove them off in a room for an hour every week in the so-called gifted and talented program where all they do is give them more work. That's what they do now. Oh, we'll put your child in the gifted program. Yep, we have one. Yep, it's awesome. It's gifted program. Here we go. Here's 20 more worksheets. Go. That's not gifted and talented. That's not talent development. That's not TD. They call it TD, but it's not. You're just taking kids and shoving them off to the side and giving them more work to do. Busy work. They need something different, fundamentally different. And then you might have your diversity, but it might take a while. But to do it this way, that's not going to get it there. Let's not get it there. Yep. Thank you. I'm glad I'm saying something right. Deb is absolutely spot on. One must give opportunities to all kids and then encourage the ones who have special talents. We need to stop apologizing for excellence, you guys. There is a hatred of excellence in our country right now, with the possible exception of the kind of faux excellence of entertainment. I mean, nothing against good entertainers that actually entertain, but we celebritize people because they have the most followers on Instagram, or, they married somebody important, or they have the most money, or whatever. I mean, the things that will earn you celebrity, it's kind of ridiculous. I would love to see, the actual people building those rockets. SpaceX rockets, they go up, they come down, and everybody looks at Elon Musk. Yes, he made it possible. That's great. And he deserves accolades and all that. Can we hear from the people actually doing it? Can we actually get news people go and profile them? They used to do that. Back in the time when we were sending people to the moon, they would talk to astronauts. They would talk to the scientists. They would go to NASA and like, so what are you doing to help, put people on the moon? Oh, well, this is what we're going to do. They had to kind of like talk about it for the layperson a little bit, but people were like glued to their TVs and glued to their radios and glued to their newspapers. I want to learn about rockets. This is so cool. And there were kids all over America. They were like building little rockets in their backyard. And I want to be a scientist and I want to go work for NASA. That was like heroes go to the moon, right? Now what do heroes do? They don't go to the moon. And that's what we should be promoting is let's go talk to these guys. These are amazing people. They're brilliant. The people at Caltech, some of them should be, I would imagine, household names, but they're not. Why not? There are so many people working right now in America who are more heroic than any teacher. And I say that even including the good teachers. And I love those of you who are out there being, really just trying to do your best job. But I'll also say this to you as one, it's also your job and you signed up for it. You signed up to take care of kids and take care of their minds and their little spirits and everything, especially if they're little. And if you do it really well, then you're doing your job really well. That doesn't make you a hero. Hero is somebody who goes above and beyond and does something extra or significantly contributes to the knowledge of all mankind. Okay? Moves the needle further through just their brilliance, their talent, their effort. Because these people are up all night. They're doing math equations. They're doing all this kind of stuff. I mean, they're doing more than they're paid to do, I'm sure. So, and they have to do it sometimes while chasing grant money and things like that. So this is if they're doing it for like public. But if they're doing it for Elon Musk, they don't have to worry about the money maybe, but they're probably doing more than they're getting paid for because that's probably the kind of people they are. But they're still more heroic, I think, than people just do their jobs. The same thing with doctors and nurses. You're a hero if you came up with a cure and you worked hard to do it. You're not a hero because you showed up to work. You're not a hero because you showed up to the emergency room in the middle of a pandemic. I'm sorry. Call me a jerk if you want, but that's what you signed up to do. You didn't sign up to take care of healthy people. And I think we lionize the wrong people in our society. And then we don't have, yes, and I want there to be more doctors and nurses too, but we are giving people like too big a head for just doing their job. We're not promoting people who are actually advancing human knowledge in very, very real ways that children need to look up to and should look up to. And I think we need to be doing that more, and especially in STEM, in the math and science, because I'll tell you right now, since I teach English to Chinese students in the morning, they are doing it there. They are absolutely doing it there. I have lesson plans where I am teaching Chinese kids about American astronauts, like a whole unit on American scientists. Do you think that kids who are 7 and 8 years old in America are learning that much detail about astronauts and scientists and going to the moon? I don't know. Maybe they are, but I'm not so sure. Let's see, what is this? He says, many young professors are brainwashed, but many can't speak up because, yes, they're afraid of not getting jobs or not getting grants. That we have politicized this to the point where you can't just be who you are, even in your private life. Like, they're probably going and scouring their Instagram and Facebook posts, whatever. And I'm sorry, you don't get the grant. You don't get the job because we disagree with your opinions. What does that have to do with being a physics professor? What does that have to do with doing really any job that isn't literally politics? I mean, they do that to journalists. The journalism right now in America is so horrible that it's useless to us, utterly useless. It's not serving its purpose. Why am I here? Like, why am I here? I am here doing this, and this isn't journalism, this is commentating, but there were several videos that I made that were closer to journalism than commentary about the CARES Act and the money and how much money there is sitting there not being spent because nobody was looking for it. To this day, I have not seen anyone in the education press, the mainstream education press, or even the mainstream press period, questioning the narrative about, oh, I just no money. I don't know how we're going to do it. And we don't have money for special ed. We don't have money for all this. We need to do more to get more funding in for special ed. And then we can meet the special ed. It's a funded mandate, y'all. And that's before CARES Act. They're lying. They lie and lie and lie and lie. And the journalists are supposed to be out talking about it. So they're doing it again. They're gaslighting you some more and gaslighting you some more that, oh no, that's that money. Oh no, that's different money. That's not that money you see, that's not really money that you see. Or Randy Weingarten, I've been fighting since the beginning to get schools open with 75 conditions that we can never possibly meet. I've been fighting from the beginning. That was yesterday. And she's lying. And you're going to be like, wait, I got like a scrapbook of articles where you were explicitly fighting for the opposite. What about these? What about this? That wasn't me. What? What are you talking? No, not at all. No, I don't know what you're talking about. Gaslighting. And, some people do. I think Martha McCallum called her on it, but most people aren't. So I know we're coming up on an hour and a half. And hi, Crystal. And I've been blabbing. Do any of you guys have anything else you want to throw in here? Comments, questions? I will take like 5 minutes or so to answer whatever comes up next. What do you think? Have I missed any super chats? Have I missed any? I hope I didn't. Gosh, I really hope. So I got that. I think I got most of them. The 7,000 genders. Yeah. Well, that's actually. Hi, Leah. I haven't talked about the gender theory on this channel because there are other people doing it better. Like I can't possibly do better than You Gotta Be Kidding Me, right? There's a channel that's actually called You Gotta Be Kidding Me. And she's wonderful. And I encourage you to go follow her. Her point of view is pretty much specifically feminist in the sense that she is very concerned about the misogyny from the trans activist movement and how it's invading female space, like women's protected spaces and Title IX and things like that, which you may or may not agree with Title IX. But the fact of the matter is that, women's sports are going to disappear. If this continues, there really is not going to be women's sports. It's going to be just another team that's with men who have taken hormones. I mean, women physically cannot possibly keep up. And so that's just those spaces are going to disappear. But there are also problems in prisons where we're having in California, they're already putting biological males who simply say they identify as female, and they're putting them into prisons and people are getting raped. So it's pretty awful. And that is actually happening. So you might want to follow her. You Got to Be Kidding Me, right? Is her channel. But as far as children go, what I will say is this. Hang on, I got some. Oh, hi, Dominic. Thank you for the super chat, Dominic. And so he's got that one. And then I saw you on Carlin's channel. Definitely a fan. Thank you so much, Eric. I appreciate it. And Radical Moderate, I'm sorry. I know you're hurting job-wise, but please only teach Chinese students CRT, especially woke math. I know. It's a major it's a problem because I started doing it 3 years ago before all of this, and now of course I'm looking at it like this. It's a little bit of an opportunity for me to kind of spy. Like I get to see what they're learning. I get to see what's going on, and I get that perspective and bring it back to inform this. They pay me, so I'm not getting nothing out of it. I don't think they're getting anything else from me. I'm an independent contractor, right? But I do the bare minimum. I'm doing just the amount to just barely cover my bills. Not really. A lot of other things that I'm doing, tutoring. I'm trying to teach a class here. I'm trying gradually to replace that income. So I feel that ethical pain. I do, but I'm not working for their government. I'm working for the children, the families. I know the government is behind all their stuff, but it's a big conflict. I'm with you, but I have to teach them what they tell me to teach. But as far as thank you. But as far as the gender stuff in schools for little kids, it is illegal, and most parents do not know this. It is illegal to ask minor children for private information about themselves or their family structure in the classroom. That is not legal. The teachers who are having them identify themselves on a matrix chart or on any kind of a questionnaire, even if the teacher says, no one else will see it but me. They're just going to turn it into me. No one else will see it. It'll be kept private. It doesn't matter. It's illegal. Okay. The Supreme Court has ruled on that. So if your child, you need to tell your child what the questions are they're allowed to answer and what they're not allowed to answer. They should never be asked about any of that stuff. The other thing you need to know is so for example, sexual orientation, and what their family's religion is and whether they have two parents in the home, you can fill that out. You can fill out that form in a demographic for the school if you want. You're not required to, by the way. But if you're an adult and they're a guardian. The child is not to be asked these questions, especially not child to teacher. That is grooming behavior. We don't do that. The next thing is one of the things, if you're standing there in the school board meeting to say, I don't want this taught in the classroom, and they'll call you all manner of names. Oh, you're homophobic, you're transphobic, you're this, you're that. You do not tell my child their gender was assigned at birth. You do not tell my child their gender was assigned at birth. You don't talk to my child about their gender. You don't. I've told you what their gender is on the demographic that I filled out when I registered them for school. That is for me to do and me to decide. And that is not your damn business. You do not talk to my child about their gender. You're very welcome. And thank you for participating. Thank you for the super chat. And I hope everyone is inspired to speak up because we have, at this point, nothing left to lose because our liberty is being taken from us already. So you could lose your job, but guess what? You could lose it anyway down the road. So, and you're more likely to, if you kind of go along with this, than if you speak up now while there's still some power in numbers, okay, to speak up. It is still, they haven't gotten to the courts. They haven't stacked the court. They haven't completely taken apart the justice system. So you got to speak up now because if they get there, it's all over. But as I was saying, they may not, do not let them tell your child that gender is assigned at birth. It is so massively confusing to a very small child, even to a kid in middle school. Okay. And by middle school, they're more, able to have these conversations, but you still have to ask the educators why. Why is it necessary to put doubt and ideas into all the children's minds about themselves to have them be decent human beings to children who already know who they are or have their own doubts about who they are already, who come to school with that? You don't need for my daughters, for example, to question their sexuality or their gender in order for them to treat someone who's non-binary or bisexual or transgender, whatever, with decency and respect. You need to have a code of ethics in your school, a code of honor in your school that is observed and upheld about how we treat people, period. That's all you need. And you need to enforce it irrespective of somebody's, demographics. Okay. You can't have this little, we don't punish people if they have this skin color attitude, because then you're still going to have problems. And then you'll use that problem as a statistic because we can't talk about who's doing it. And then you'll say, we need to do this for everybody. Stop it. You don't need to tell all the children they might be some other gender. You don't know. There's all these genders. It's messed up, because what ends up happening is the students start figuring out their social currency and cachet in having something be different about you. So it's not just anymore about accepting differences that are organically occurring and having a student who is different feel welcome and included. It's now about excluding normies, excluding people who there's nothing different about them, because they're putting the idea in children's minds that if you're just, cis, het, whatever these things are, if you're just that person, then you're in denial. You're in denial, or maybe you're just conforming to the cis heteronormative, blah, 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 whatever word salad garbage that they claim is so problematic. And now your child has a little identity crisis. What before was just something that every kid wanted to be, right? I just want to be normal, right? Now it's the opposite of what they want to be. So you can't, they don't need to be doing that. Don't let them tell you they need to do that in order to have acceptance and inclusion. No, inclusion means we make everyone feel welcome. Everyone, including people who are just people. They're just, yes, I am just me. I don't have some outside the norm thing about myself. And believe it or not, yes, biologically, it is outside the norm to be non-binary, trans, whatever these things are. It is outside the norm. Biologically, most humans are heterosexual. Biologically, most humans are the gender their genitalia say they are, their DNA says they are. That actually is the gender. That is the sex they are, rather. That's the sex they are. The gender expression they want to have, that's up to them. But sex and gender are two different things. Gender is a social construct. I'll go with you there. But sex is sex. There's two. Just the two. That's it. That's it. There's not 3, 4, 5, 100 different sexes that you could be. There's two. And how you want to express yourself after that is your business. And yes, everybody should be accepted. If a boy wants to wear girl clothes, we don't make fun of him because that's rude. That's nasty. You just accept him the way he is. But don't entertain his delusion that he is actually a girl. He's not actually a girl. That's insulting to the girl. Okay? And that's what we're doing. And that's what we're teaching increasingly younger and younger. And yes, Leah, that's what we're doing. And that's what we're doing to younger and younger kids. We're telling them, no, they really are a girl. They really are a boy. And here's where it really gets messed up. And especially in girls, we've seen a 5,000% increase in the number of girls seeking surgery, top surgery in particular, to become whatever. They won't ever be a boy, but you know what I'm saying. And that's a trend. That's a fad. That's not real. And there are surgical outfits springing up, we used to have like one gender clinic and now there's like, hundreds. It's getting to be really sinister. And they're teaching it in schools, which is making it worse. Because like I said, it's like, now I can be different. Now I can be somebody if I do this thing. And when you have teachers and even some doctors, so be careful. There are even some doctors now who, if there's a girl who's a tomboy. I was a tomboy till I was, at least 18. At least 18. I was very boyish. I played on an all-boys soccer team. Then I played on a girls' team in high school because there was a girls' team at that point. But I still wore almost all boys' clothes. Like I shopped at LL Bean. I got the button-down Oxfords and the khaki pants. And, occasionally I'd wear like a Laura Ashley skirt because that's what was in style. But I really didn't like the girly side of me. I was like, I'm an athlete. I don't want to do that. I don't know why. I was a daddy's girl, so maybe I just wanted to please my father. That's probably what it was. And he probably didn't care, but I was trying to be very more masculine. Plus, to be honest, I didn't fit in with the other girls. I was never the gossipy girl. I was never the one who just wanted it wasn't me. I didn't want to have a gaggle of people around me. I always felt awkward, but I got along with the boys. I liked how direct they were. I liked that, you could be pissed off and the next day you get along. It worked for me. Today, if I were that girl and I was like that at 3, 4, 5 years old, I can imagine a teacher or somebody saying to me, have you considered the possibility that your daughter is non-binary? Have you considered the possibility that your daughter is really a boy trapped in a girl's body, which is, by the way, not a real thing? And my mother, if they had said something like that to my mother was the type of person, quite abusive. My mother was the type of person who, for the doctor's attention and approval, I could absolutely see going down that path because she really didn't like me. She didn't like that I was so much like my dad. She didn't like a lot of things about me. And I could absolutely see her doing that kind of thing. Being like, oh, so you really are a boy. Okay, let's give you this. Thank goodness she was gone by the time I was, 9 years old. But the fact is, don't discount that there are people out there, there are parents out there, there are doctors out there, there are people who are going to take advantage of this. And there are vulnerable children. The teachers should not be getting inside our kids' heads and messing around with their self-perception. That is not a teacher's job. They are doing way too much, way too much. They should be teaching our kids to read, write, and do math. It is not their job to parent our children. It's not their job. It's also not their job to solve every fight that our kids have. Kids are going to insult each other. They're going to bicker. They might even bully each other a little bit. And when I say bully, I don't mean like the vicious, nasty cyberbullying. I'm talking about, the like little nasty remarks. I would rather see the empowerment of the kid who's getting picked on. In other words, go build that kid up. Teach that kid to be resilient. Tell that kid those people don't matter. I know it feels like they matter and it sucks that they're doing that and it's wrong and we'll speak to them separately. But stop with this everyone has to get along nonsense. Okay? Not everyone's going to get along. And 5 minutes after you have this little restorative conversation where you smush their little faces together and go, be nice and make friends and apologize and everybody apologize to each other and get along, they're going to go back out to the playground and go, fuck you. They're going to go right back out there and now they hate you double because of this happened. They're just making it worse. They don't want that. They want the school to discipline the meanies and be like, stop it. We have a code of ethics here. We have a code of treatment. And if you keep this up, you're not, you're going to lose certain privilege. You go to detention. This is going to happen. Note home to mom. There's going to be problems for you. Stop it. And then you turn to the other kids separately and you say, what can we do so that you don't take that and internalize it? Because that's nothing. Okay. But we're not doing that. We're not doing that. We're having this whole, like, let's have a little meet and greet and everybody be friends. And it's unrealistic. That's not, not only that, we jump in at a moment's notice. So now they don't ever learn how to solve any of their problems. They don't learn how to have a conversation about anything difficult. Let's have courageous conversations, except let's not have courageous conversations. And that's why you now have kids going, you're microaggressing against me and you're mean and you have to agree with everything I say. Yesterday with Wheezy, she was like, I'm going to tap out. I have better things to do. I got to be out of here because I have better things to do. I have clients waiting for me, except I'm going to stick around another half hour because apparently my clients are not real. And she never left, but she was using that to bully. That is bullying. You're bullying me is bullying. Your microaggressing is bullying. You can't speak words because feelings. That's bullying. It's literally bullying. And we need to, what educators should be able to do in a teaching setting is say, I'm not getting involved in this. This is, I'm sorry that you feel like your feelings are hurt. That is an issue for you to take up with this person. You need to take that up with that person. And if you can't, or you won't, or they're not going to agree to speak the way you want them to speak, then sorry. Then you sit over there and they sit over there and get on with your life. You're here to learn. You're not here to make everybody be nice to you. Your pal says cutting and eating disorders were big in the 90s, but it was discouraged. Same thing going on now with gender ID, but it is encouraged. Yes. Thank you. And that hits extremely close to home, by the way. I won't get into it at this moment, but I have in my own family had that exact situation. So with eating disorder, believe it or not, being encouraged. It's on the wane, but there are girls who are trying to find any way to fit in. And if they can't do, they're not going to do the gender thing. Like, it's like, now that's not for me. The eating disorder is still an option. There are actually websites out there now that say how to become an anorexic. how to become a bulimic, how to do it. And girls use these websites because having that problem, having that way of getting attention, it now they have something that they're a victim. They have something that they're special. And I don't say that to, I don't know how to say that. It's not cynical. Okay. They're feeling real pain. They're feeling othered. They're feeling really left out of the social, the way the social life works in school. And that's the fault of the adults. That's not inclusion. You're not doing diversity, equity, inclusion if people feel like they have to have a problem to fit in. That's really messed up. And yeah, it is sick. My daughter's last school that they went to, the last public school before I got them out, was a charter school that I put them in thinking it would be better than the regular school. That's why I say on this channel, charter schools are not a panacea. And it was okay in the elementary, but it turned very dark in the middle school. And the English teacher went into the library. They had a small library. Charter school doesn't have a lot of books, but she organized the entire little library by victim classification. I didn't believe it till I saw it. Like, my daughter told me about it when she was, I guess about 13. And she said, Mom, I went to the library today and like it was all reorganized and everything in there was like by victim group. And I said, no, come on. And I volunteered in the school teaching a debate class. And I went in and looked for myself because I was like, this can't be true, right? No, it was true. And they even had a section for victims of sexual abuse. Books about that in a middle school, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. Kids who are 11 through like 15. And rape victims, they like books. Now, I'm not saying don't have any books or don't have that available for kids. I'm just saying if you're going to call it out like that and you're going to call out the like victims of this and victims of that, refugees, all this type of stuff. I couldn't find, I was like, where's the section for just books? Like, regular books that don't have victims. What I found was she'd taken books like novels and things like that and found some way to find a victim character and put it in a victim classification. It was so messed up. It was absolutely so messed up. Yeah, gaining is a new eating disorder because it's now okay. You can't fat shame anybody. Now they're saying that, but believe it or not, there are eating disorders where people eat too much, and even some bulimics are overweight. So eating disorders run the gamut. There are all kinds of eating disorders. There are kids who eat things that aren't food. That's an eating disorder. Like, I learned so much about eating disorders in the last year. It was not a fun topic. But I will say that school absolutely contributes to it. And the social situation that teachers and people are encouraging in school is contributing to mental illness. 100%. Absolutely it is. And now I worry about the kids who are going to be, gaslit about critical race theory or their race. I mean, my daughter had to do a privilege walk in that same school in 6th grade. 6th grade. And because they included things like your gender identity and your sexual orientation, so they didn't put it on paper, I didn't have any way to go to authorities and say, this teacher did something inappropriate and asked inappropriate questions of children. It was all done outside on the basketball court. Line up. Okay, if you're heterosexual, step forward. Think about that for a second. You're a 6th grader. You're going, wasn't really ready to come out right now, but do I lie? What do I do? And then people have told me, I made a video that, I think you're exaggerating. Is that traumatizing? Really? Have you been an 11-year-old who hasn't come out yet? And your teacher's now doing a privilege exercise and attaching privilege to being heterosexual, but you think you're not, and you're not really sure what to do. I mean, that's just on that score. Then there's other things. Your parents are going through a divorce, but they're not yet divorced. But now you're going to announce to the world that this is going on in your family because they add that as a question. Kids should not be doing this. This is an interesting question. Do we need more men in school? Your pal asks. As with all of these kinds of questions, I would say it depends. I would have said an immediate yes if I were thinking of, the kind of men that used to be in schools where, you had your teachers and they were just like any, somebody's dad, somebody like any man you would know, right? Regular guys. Thinking of some of the men that I've seen become elementary school teachers in the last decade, I don't know they'd be any different. So to say, do we need more men? I'm like, we need more adults. I'll say that. We need more adults. What's an adult? Well, an adult knows the difference between an opinion and a fact. An adult knows how to suppress their own emotions in a situation, not project them on to children, period. Never mind children that aren't their own. We all, as parents, kind of sometimes slip up. I mean, I've done it, once in a while, but you catch yourself. And that's the other thing adults do is you catch yourself behaving badly and you take accountability. You have accountability for yourself and say, that was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. And I'm sorry I spoke to you that way or whatever. But you really work hard to keep yourself separate from the students in the school emotionally. It doesn't mean you don't feel. It doesn't mean you show them joy or happiness when they succeed or sadness when something goes wrong. It just means that you don't project your hopes and dreams and needs and political values and everything onto them. That's not how adults behave. Adults understand where they end and someone else begins, and what is their job and not their job, and what is their right and not their right. And right now, I would say we have a lot of overgrown toddlers who are teaching, who seem to think that the classroom is the place where they work out their psychological traumas, and they are bullies. I've seen bullies. I've seen emotional abuse. So there's bullying abuse, emotional abuse, and then there's the kind of emotional abuse where they just manipulate the kids. Like I don't, like how Wheezy did. I don't have to be here. I work so hard, and I don't have to be here doing this job. You guys make this job so hard for me. Why do I have to be here and doing this? And it's so frustrating. And why do you have to suck so bad? Is basically that's manipulative. It's abusive. If you don't like your job, quit your job. Go home. Do something else. But you don't project your misery into the classroom. There's got to be a wall. And adults know that. Professionals know that. So we need more professionals. We need more adult professional teachers. And I've seen people who are very adult who are 25. It's not an age thing, and then I've seen 50-year-old teachers who are juvenile as hell. And I think, honestly, they were still they were teaching because that's where they felt big and important. I'm a teacher because if I go out in the world of actual adults, they'll eat me alive. The old saying, like, those who can't teach. Sometimes it's true. But I think we've removed that filter, and the incentives are for those kind of people. Teachers' unions thrive with people like that. The people who want someone to coddle their infantile needs. That's what the union provides. If you're an adult and you're a professional and you want to do your job, that you're going to butt heads with the union because you don't want to be parented, and you don't want somebody who's just going to come in and, cover up for all your mistakes. You take responsibility for mistakes. And in fact, you try not to make them in the first place. So, let's see. He said, your pal says, I think men bring a different culture, but I guess it depends. I'm used to a female lead environment and it's quite different than when I was male. That's true. And that's one of the reasons that I was sort of inclined initially to go, yes. But it also comes down to viewpoint diversity there, doesn't it? That would be why viewpoint diversity is so important. You need more men simply because men are different from women, and men are going to have a different viewpoint. But I don't know that just getting more men, like, let's just count off 10 and have them in there. I think just like with women, you don't want more women in any environment just to have women either. Like we still have to be selective, but I would say right now things are so slanted that it probably would be good to just get more men in for the different perspectives, and the different point of view, the different energy, and also students, especially students with no father in the home. And I sound like I'm contradicting myself because people might say, but I thought you said don't parent them. Not to parent, just to role model. Just somebody to role model sort of mature adult male behavior. As far as like, I get up, I come to work, I'm polite, I treat people well, I'm doing whatever. I mean, I'm just being an adult male in your life that you see every day, doing things responsibly, etc. Like that has value. And then if you have an opportunity to actually get in and help that child with their schoolwork and, get closer to them on an intellectual level, just kind of like, hey, let me help you succeed. I think that adds tremendous value to those boys' lives. So yeah, I would say, yeah, definitely we do in that respect. Yeah. And then, oh yeah, oh God, the people who go straight to teaching right after college, if I were the king, queen of the world, whatever, the lead person in the world that could magically make rules, it would be, you don't get to go teach right after college or grad school. You've got to take some time and like live in the world doing something that would be a preference would be given. And I say that because I don't think you should go teach kids the skills they need to function in the world if you've never really done it. Because school's not the world. And yes, you're getting paid. And yes, it's a job. And yes, I'm sure you go to the store and you do other stuff. But you're teaching them about all kinds of subjects. You're teaching them about math and science and economics and, especially high school. Now, elementary school, maybe it's a little bit okay. But you get into the high school and you're teaching courses about how the economy works and how, political love, this and that and the other. And you've never actually had to be out there. You've always been in academia. I don't know. I don't think you have the right perspective. That's just my point of view. I think I learned more in the 2 years that I worked between college and grad school, because I didn't teach. I went to college, I got a degree, I went to work in the world, and I didn't make money. Like I was like struggling and doing all kinds of things. And then I decided to go back to grad school and become a teacher. And I feel very strongly that my perspective coming from that world added to my teaching, made me a better teacher, made me have more respect for the job I was doing and the time I was taking from these kids, that I had to maximize its effectiveness, that I needed to make sure these kids learned those basic skills, because I knew what it was like out there, how hard it was for a college graduate, somebody who had a college degree and was good at school. I was really good at school. I was a great student. Okay. But it was still really hard. I came out of school into a recession, and it was hard to get a job, and it was hard to keep a job, and it was hard to find a job. And I had to know all kinds of skills to even just get those few jobs I had. And thinking about some of these kids that I taught, the urgency was much more there to be real and not be all up in this, we need to end racism utopia. Like, wow. I wonder sometimes, do these teachers even know what they're pushing for? Do they know what the world would look like if we just tear down the institutions? I don't think they do, because the only institution they're real familiar with is the school. It's all they've ever known. So I have a bias. I definitely have a bias against people who go school to school. And that's it, especially for the upper grades, middle school and above. And it's almost all of them. It's almost all of them. We need to make it easier for professional people in the professional world to become teachers. People who've been out living life and now they're like maybe my age. Okay, let's say, they're 55 or so, or even just 45. And they're like, I'm kind of done with the rat race. And I've done my thing and I it was good. I made some money. But I'd really like to go and pass on my love of such and such subject, math, science, whatever that I'm good at, or maybe I haven't worked in that field. And I'd like to go teach. My dad tried to do that. My dad was, he was an attorney for his whole career. Okay. And he had a very successful career, but he was an amateur historian. And I say amateur in the sense that he didn't write books about history, but he read, we had walls and walls and walls and walls of books of history. It's all he ever did. Every free moment he read history, and he wrote curricula. He wrote entire courses on, American history, especially American history. And all he wanted to do was go teach high school history in his retirement. That was his dream. I just want to go teach high school history. And he could have done it. He had a whole course written, everything. I told him he should have put it in a book, but I don't know. He didn't do it. I think he was shot down because he applied to so many places and he kept getting turned down. And they kept saying he taught college, he taught law school. He even taught a course in constitutional history at University of Connecticut, which is history. He taught a course in history of the law, everything. And he went to the local private school in his town. And they just sort of laughed at him. Then he went to another school. And they said, well, you're too old. I don't think you'd be able to control the classroom. And, you don't have a teaching degree and you don't have a certificate and and reasons. He couldn't get a job. He couldn't get a job teaching. And to me, that's sad because the kids were deprived of having what I think, a person I think would have been an excellent teacher, somebody who loved it. Like we're talking passionately loved history. And how many times does a student get to have a teacher who's passionate about their subject matter? That's just what they love more than anything in this world. And I don't think we should be putting up barriers to people like that becoming teachers. I think that we should we should definitely be encouraging and recruiting people from the professional world to go into teaching. As far as what incentives, I don't know. I can't think of any, but let's stop putting up disincentives. Let's stop making it so it's just so burdensome to even get the job in the first place. The unions create all kinds of hurdles because they want you going through their track. They don't actually want free thinking individuals who can maintain their own lifestyle. If you want to go into teaching and you've had a career and you have a savings and you sort of like, you're not in it for the money, like you'll take the paycheck and, it's not going to make or break you if it's not as much as you made before. They don't want you. The unions don't want that, because then how are they going to claim we need more money? We need more money. So if there's anybody out there watching this, or if you know anybody out there who's trying to create new schools and trying to build new models for schools or, micro schools or whatever, my advice is create opportunities for professionals to come in and teach part-time, teach as volunteers, have that be something they give back to the community, maybe even be it like a tax deductible, in-kind contribution or something, maybe even offer them the opportunity to do that, in hours that are atypical. So the school day isn't necessarily like that part of the day, like maybe it's a little bit into the evening. I mean, get creative. We can redefine school and get creative and overcome some of these things. That's my theory anyway. But I think there are teachers out there that aren't teaching. And I don't mean teachers who ever were teachers. I mean, people who are excellent at teaching and may not even know it. They just love a subject. And if you told them, I could make it possible for you to teach an English class once a week to a group of students who really need to learn, would you be open to that? I bet you there are people who'd be like, yeah, that would be so cool. I would totally do that. I think there are even college students, maybe not today's college students, but you could go find some decent colleges or some decent college students and maybe even screen them for being, I'll keep my politics at the door, but they want to come and they love kids and they would just love to talk about their favorite novels. I want to do a novel study with this group of kids. They do it on OutSchool online, and that's great, but not every parent wants online anymore. And I don't blame them. They're like, I want my kid to go somewhere and be with humans. I understand. And why not make that possible in person? To teach a single class on a single novel? Why not? Why does it have to be like the whole year? We got to do all this stuff. And we gotta think outside the box, you guys. But we're not ever going to do that if every time we try to we're talking with these people at school boards or we're talking to critical race theorists and they say, so you don't want to solve this problem. Stop listening to them. Become the person who is very clear that you want to solve problems, but you have other ideas. No, I just disagree with you. Shut up. This is what I want to do. I envision this. Why not this instead? That's not the only way to solve this problem. In fact, I think that's creating a problem. Go away. La, 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 la. Don't let yourself be bulldozed or abused or gaslit or, have strawman arguments. It's just crazy. But I've now been rambling for 2 hours, so I'm going to let you guys go and enjoy your Saturday night. This is interesting. Hang on one second. Don Pedro says, my daughter went into teaching in 2019, lasted 8 months. She couldn't deal with the lack of professionalism in the admin and staff. I lasted less than 2 years. Yeah, same reason. And let's see, we've got your pal says the teaching positions around my area pay $50,000 starting to $90,000 top, not including any bonus pay, education bonuses, extracurriculars, low income school bonuses of up to 12%. Yeah, anybody who tells you they are not paid well for what they do, I think doesn't know what they get paid. It's that simple. And part of why they complain is if they went from like college, grad school back in to school, they have no perspective. They don't understand that the same 25 or 30-year-old person out in the private sector trying to get a job doing something of sort of equivalent level of productive ability, let's say, like you're actually like adding monetary value to the world, is making a lot less. A lot less. Go to work in any other nonprofit, you're paid like half that. That's, then go to work in a profit business, you're probably making 2/3 that. If you're at that age with that level of education and you don't have like a hard skill. No, you have to have a skill to get paid more, that amount. And it's, they don't understand. They really don't understand. Yeah, 50,000 in the private sector. I didn't make 50,000 in the private sector until I'd been working for going on 10 years, I think. And I had a master's degree. Oh, thank you. I didn't mean to actually click that. I didn't click that because you said I was not wrong. I just clicked it. So anyway, oh, Leah, you quit for the same reasons? Yeah. It's 15 years. Wow. Yeah. 50,000 in the private sector is, for, like I said, if you're 25 to 30 years old and you're making 50,000 in the private sector, you probably live in a major city where like that's the minimum or something, or, in major city adjacent, or you work in a field, that just has high pay. Anyway, maybe it's like marketing or finance or something like that. But for the average person, who just has like, you don't have a hard skill. So maybe you're working in hotel management, or you're working in restaurant management, or you're working in, admin somewhere or something like that. 50,000 is not a starting salary. They're dreaming. Anyway, so thank you all for coming. Thank you all for supporting my channel. It is so gratifying that I'm actually like reaching people. If you're not currently a member of the Locals, and it would benefit you to be so, if you're not familiar with what I do there, I'm intending for it to have more homeschooling content, but I am at least there to offer my support if you have specific questions. So my supporters on my Locals have a section where they can post a research request. And in the comments, you can say, I'm trying to find this, or I need help with that, or what do you think between these two curriculum, whatever. And I will, within 24 hours, I will respond with a decent, meaty response. Like I will research it. I will give you the information. I also have a list of homeschool resources that you can access for the supporters. I keep adding to it as I go. And if you have additions I can add to it, I will add to them. I'll add them to there. And I keep meaning to make more videos specifically about homeschooling. But honestly, I think I do better just helping people on the fly, because a lot of times they don't know what problem they're going to have until they have it. And so if I can make a video and I put it out there, it's not necessarily timely, like it's not current. It would sit there in a library like a resource, but I find that people are like, I need it now. I need a problem right now. Or I need a solution to my problem right now. So I have that research request, and I have 2 Zoom calls a week. So the supporters can come to a Zoom call, and in that Zoom call, you could ask me like, okay, we're here. I got this question about homeschooling. I got a question about homeschooling. We also talk about other things. We talk about this stuff happening in the schools. They can say, I'm going to a school board meeting and I want to speak. I have my little thing that I've written. Can I read it for you guys and see if you think it's any good? Or so-and-so has asked me to, defend blah, blah, blah. What should I say? That's what the Zoom calls are good for. We can go over that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's about it. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great rest of your night. And I am now going to go back to the last episode of Nevers and try to figure it out. I've tried 3 times to get through the first 15 minutes, and I'm not very good with science fiction. My husband told me I have to read the wiki, so I'm going to have to go read the wiki, and then hopefully I will understand it. For a smart person, sometimes I'm kind of thick. Anyway, thank you guys. Have a great night, and I will see you next time.